I want to talk about a few things today, and one is a conversation I had during the week with a former attorney for Cal Recycle, Department of Conservation, Division of Recycling. This was in the mid-90s, as he related it. He was approached by people in the enforcement branch, and they had a list of people that they didn't want to be involved in recycling or anybody associated with them. And the attorney, as he told me the story, looked at the list and he says, this isn't right. So he took it to the director, Michael Byrne. Michael Byrne was director in about 1995 and an appointment by Wilson. And he asked him, do you see anything wrong with this list that enforcement is looking at, wanting to use? And evidently he took a look at it and he said, they're all Latino. Don't use it. That was in 95, let's say. Byrne would have left, and then we would have had new appointments. And this speaks to the revolving door in California bureaucracy and the departments. So the staff had this idea that they wanted to impose profiling on Latinos, and they never gave up. So later on, what do we find? We find that they did eventually put in profiling, and they did it within the computer system, and they did it because they outlasted the leadership that gets appointed and reappointed and appointed again. I think I've mentioned it. The philosophy of many in Sacramento is that the people who work in the departments are the real owners, and the leadership that comes and goes with political appointments is strictly renters. So if they really want something, if they really believe in something, whether it's good or bad, they will continue to press on. And in this case, we have the app in Doris, and now they continually do pump out profiling. And if somebody applies for a certification, they will use those lists and ask them if they know these people. Now, this is not a part of what's in the regulation as pertaining to certification, to licensing. So they've gone way outside the box. And it's not permitted, it's not authorized, but they do it anyway. And so they even come up with making applicants sign agreements that they won't have anything to do with people that they put on this list, and make them sign it. Otherwise they'll delay their certification, maybe not give it to them at all. Not standards on which they're to make the decision, but things that they do. And how do I know that it delays things? I once had a certification representative tell me, when an application comes in, it's considered incomplete until they determine everything's there, and then it goes into a complete status. And this is when the time clock should start ticking. But she said that when they send the certification applications over to enforcement, it goes from a complete status to an incomplete status. Well, they don't have a right to do that. But what this shows is how the behavior of the department has changed and evolved over the years, and whether it was good change or bad change. One thing that we had is that the attorneys that fought this in the beginning were gone, and now new attorneys come in. And if you look at enforcement actions, certification actions, you will see that they have evolved from the way they were in the beginning to new and different ways, which are more restrictive and more punitive. But what really didn't change were the regulations and the laws that governed. It was a change in philosophy. As I look at it, they probably sat down and had brainstorming sessions to figure out new ways to create penalties and impose them on the participants. Probably one good one that I saw recently, the regulations call for recyclers to inspect the containers and see if there's CACRB on them. But enforcements, they've got their own standards. So if you have containers that are properly labeled, but may have a logo of a sport team in Arizona, then you should have known not to buy that. Although they've never put out a memo or a notice to tell anybody that that's how they're going to enforce. But what would be the problem with that? Oh yeah, you can't regulate by memos. Yes, we had that before. I called it the underground regulation from hell. And the guy who was in enforcement, who wrote those underground regulations, has now moved on, and he's over in Cal Cannabis. And he's probably still operating with the same philosophy. All punishment is good punishment, and never knew a regulation I couldn't make up a better one for. So watch out there over in Cal Cannabis, for those of you that deal with Cal Cannabis. Moral of the story here is you need to know history. You need to know what the law really says. And if you want to deal with the problems within state agencies, we've got to learn to put standards on them, that the people are properly qualified. One of the things we saw in the USA case was they went out and they did surveillance of people coming into the state. I say they didn't know what they were doing. They had no standards of enforcement, law, no standards of auditing, and they ignored the law. The law said that they should protect the fund and prevent this, and they didn't. Hundreds of times they have not done this, and that's why you've got to be aware that all government may not be good government. We must constantly keep pressure on to ensure that our government serves us, public service, service to the public, and the participants are part of the public in this program. And how many of them have been Latino wiped out? Anyway, that'll do it for this one, and stay tuned, there will be more. Thank you.